The sun blazed mercilessly over the rusted zinc roofs of aHungry market, painting every surface in shimmering heat waves. The smell of smoke, fried akara, and engine oil filled the dusty air. Ruth sat hunched behind her small metal tray of cooked yam slices, half covered in a stained cloth. Her faded wrapper clung to her damp skin, her blouse stuck to her back, and the old slippers on her feet had thinned to the bare soles. Business had been painfully slow all day. She glanced at the tray. Just 3 slices left, that was all. She'd started the morning with hope, as always. But by noon, that hope had begun to rot under the sun, just like the yam on her tray. With a sigh, Ruth reached for the plastic bowl beside her and counted the change inside. Coins. A crumpled 20, one worn 100 naira note. That was it. 100 naira. Bread cost 100. Maybe she could get a few slices and a sachet of water for Ada. It wasn't much, but it would be something. Maybe she could lie again. Tell her daughter she had already eaten. Watch Ada eat and pretend it didn't break her. She was still deciding when she noticed the boy. He stood a few feet away, bare-chested, barefoot, and covered in grime. His ribs pushed through his skin like they were trying to escape. He stared at the yam with the kind of hunger Ruth recognized. Not just physical hunger, but the kind that made you feel invisible in the middle of a crowd. He didn't speak, just stared. Ruth looked at the yam, then at the boy, then back at the money in her hand. She closed her eyes briefly, as if arguing with God in her mind. Then she stood, walked to the boy, and pressed the 100 naira note into his hand. "You look hungrier than me," she said, gently. "Take it, eat something." The boy looked up at her like she had just handed him a treasure. His lips trembled. "Thank you, Ma," he whispered, before running off into the sea of bodies and noise. Ruth stood there for a moment, the sweat dripping down her neck, her hands now empty. A strange calm settled over her. She packed up the tray, wiped her forehead, and began the long walk home. No bread, no water, nothing. That night, Ruth lay on her thin mat beside Ada, watching her daughter's small chest rise and fall in sleep. The room was dark, lit only by the distant glow of a neighbor's candle. Her stomach ached with hunger. She pulled the wrapper tighter around herself and shut her eyes, but sleep didn't come. Only the sound of her own breathing and the quiet, cruel growl of an empty belly. There was a time when Ruth's days began with the sound of students reciting morning prayers in unison, the smell of chalk dust in the air, and the feel of red ink staining her fingertips. She wore clean, pressed Ankara dresses then, carried a handbag with lesson notes, and walked with the gentle pride of a woman who knew she was shaping minds. She had been a teacher, not rich but respected, and she had been married to Victor, a calm, well-mannered civil servant with a sharp wit and a soft voice. They lived in a modest flat on the mainland. Life wasn't grand, but it was stable. They planned for a future, one where Ada would go to the best public school, maybe even university abroad one day. Then came the accident. A bus, brake failure, 10 dead. Victor was one of them. Ruth got the call in the middle of a school day. She didn't scream. She just stood there frozen, the paper in her hand fluttering to the ground. The days after were a blur. Funeral arrangements, condolences, bureaucracy. Then came the shock. No pension, no benefits. The system had technical complications. His files were incomplete. She visited the office every week, begged, filled forms, got bounced around like a tennis ball until the truth settled in her bones. No help was coming. Victor's family, once warm and chatty, turned cold. Whispers turned into accusations. They said she should have stopped him from traveling that day, that she was careless, that she was unlucky. By the time Ada turned 4, Ruth had sold everything of worth. The fridge, the TV, her gold necklace from her wedding. She moved into a single-room apartment in a slum behind the railway line. No ceiling, only a fan that rattled at night and leaked water when it rained. She started selling cooked yam and pepper sauce from a tray. She woke at 4 a.m., borrowed kerosene, boiled yams, and set out with her basin balanced on her head. She learned how to shout louder, walk faster, bargain harder. Survival became instinct. There was no time for mourning anymore. Now, at 38, Ruth's palms were calloused, her back ached constantly, and her dreams had shrunk into the shape of daily prayers. She didn't think about tomorrow, only whether there would be enough to eat tonight. But Ada was the one thread of light in Ruth's dim, fraying life. At 10 years old, she had eyes that saw everything, quick to smile, quick to help, full of curiosity that frightened Ruth. "Mummy, one day I'll become a lawyer and fight for people like us," Ada would say, her tiny fingers stroking Ruth's arm at night. Ruth always smiled. "Yes, baby. Study well. The world is waiting for you." She lied to Ada sometimes. She told her the rent was paid when it wasn't, that she had eaten lunch when she hadn't, that her back didn't hurt when it did. Ada deserved dreams. Ruth couldn't afford to infect her daughter with her own despair. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of the night, when Ada was asleep, Ruth would sit by the window and cry, silently, like a woman afraid of waking her own pain. She wasn't afraid of work. She was afraid that no matter how hard she tried, Ada would still grow up in the same cycle of hunger and compromise, that she would one day become bitter, tired, lost. Every night, Ruth whispered prayers over her daughter's sleeping body, begging God to break the curse of poverty, if not for her, then for Ada. Her daughter was all she had, all she lived for. And though she was worn down to the bone, Ruth forced herself to believe, just a little, that something would change, that somehow, all this giving, all this hurting, wasn't for nothing. The morning started like any other. Ruth was up before the sun, boiling yam on her small charcoal stove in front of their one-room apartment. She moved slowly, her muscles sore from carrying the tray every day, but her hands never paused. The familiar rhythm of peeling, slicing and frying gave her a sense of purpose. By 8 a.m., she was at her regular corner in the market, wedged between a cobbler and a woman selling second-hand shoes. Her pot simmered gently. The smell of palm oil and pepper began to drift through the air. A few regulars stopped by, dropping coins into her bowl and taking slices wrapped in newspaper. Then, out of nowhere, 3 uniformed men appeared. "Market Task Force." "Who owns this stall?" one of them barked. Ruth stood up quickly, wiping her palms on her wrapper. "It's me, sir. Is something wrong? Where is your trading permit?" Ruth's heart dropped. "Sir, I'm still trying to get it. I was told I had time." Before she could finish, they were already packing her things. The pot, the table, even the small stool she used to sit. "Please, please, I'm begging you," she cried, grabbing one officer's sleeve. "That food is all I have for today. I've not even sold half." But they shoved her aside like she was nothing. The entire market watched, some with pity, some with indifference. One woman tried to speak up, but the officers silenced her with a glare. In a matter of minutes, Ruth was left standing in the dust, her hands empty, her eyes wild with disbelief. She walked home in a daze, her legs heavy, her throat dry. When she reached the compound, Ada was waiting outside their door, a folded piece of paper in her hand. "Welcome, Mummy," she said quietly. "Teacher said I should give you this." Ruth took the note, her fingers trembling. It was from the school. "Final warning. Outstanding fees. If not paid by Friday, your daughter will be removed from class." Ruth felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She didn't even go inside. She turned around and started walking again, going from compound to compound. "Please, Sister Ngozi, anything you can spare, even 500 naira. Nahan, Ruth, you know my own husband hasn't sent money this week. Brother Emeka, I will pay back by month end. I swear, don't drag me into your problem. I'm still paying my own children's school fees. Madam Shade, just help me this once." "Ruth, a beg. I don't like how you're always begging. It's not good." Each rejection felt like another slap. By sunset, Ruth returned home with nothing, not one coin. She sat in the darkness, her back pressed against the peeling wall. Her body didn't ache anymore. It was beyond pain now, just numbness. Ada was lying on the mat, pretending to read a book, but her eyes kept darting toward her mother. Later that night, Ruth tried to keep quiet as she cried, covering her mouth with her hand. But Ada heard it anyway. She crawled over, laid her head on Ruth's lap, and whispered, "Mom, don't worry. One day, I'll make you proud." Ruth stroked her daughter's hair, her tears falling silently onto Ada's cheeks. She wanted to believe her. She wanted to believe that this wasn't the end, just another bend in the road. But in that moment, all she could feel was defeat. The days blurred into each other like a watercolor painting soaked in rain, edges fading, color draining. After losing her market stall, Ruth swallowed her pride and took a job as a cleaner in a small roadside canteen. The owner, Madam Tina, barked orders from morning till night and paid just enough to buy gari and maybe 2 cups of rice. Ruth scrubbed floors, washed oily pots, and cleaned toilets while holding back coughs that tore through her chest like broken glass. The coughing had started weeks ago. At first, it was just in the mornings. Then it began to linger, dry, sharp, exhausting. When Madame Tina noticed, she snapped, "I don't want your village disease hero. Better clean that toilet before customers start arriving." Ruth nodded, swallowing her protest. She needed the money. She always needed the money. Back home, Ada began skipping meals, pressing one piece of bread into her mother's palm, while insisting, "I already ate at school, Mummy." But Ruth saw the hollowness under Ada's eyes. She noticed the way the girl now walked slower, sat quieter, smiled less. Ada was 15, but already carrying the weight of the world. Some nights, Ruth lay awake, her body aching, listening to Ada's even breaths in the dark, and wondering if she was doing the right thing, raising her child in suffering. She once wrote a letter to her cousin in Enugu, thinking she might send Ada to live there for a while. But when she mentioned it, Ada broke down in tears. "Don't send me away, Mummy," she whispered, wrapping her arms around Ruth's frail body. "I don't want comfort without you." Ruth tore the letter to pieces that night. The years passed, like wind slipping through broken windows. Ada became a young woman before Ruth's eyes. Her limbs lengthened, her face sharpened, and her spirit hardened with responsibility. After school, she carried a small tray of oranges and stood by the main road, calling out, "Sweet orange, just 50 naira," to rushing cars and tired pedestrians. Sometimes she made enough to buy beans and bread, sometimes just sachet water. Ruth grew weaker, her cough deepening. Her body aged faster than time. Her hands, once steady from years of chalk and blackboard, now trembled when she tried to wash clothes. Then one hot afternoon, as she made her way back from Madame Tina's canteen, Ruth stumbled near the bus stop. Her vision blurred. Her breath came in shallow gasps. The heat wrapped around her like wet cloth. She collapsed. Vendors screamed. A few gathered. One woman shouted, "Is this not the woman who works for Madame Tina?" Someone called Ada, whose number was written on a crumpled paper inside Ruth's wrapper. Ada came running, her face twisted in panic. "Mummy! Mummy, please wake up!" she cried, shaking Ruth's shoulders. A bike man agreed to take them to the nearest clinic. Ada held her mother tightly, praying the whole way. At the clinic, Ruth was laid on a rusted metal bed. The nurse placed an oxygen mask on her face while the doctor examined her. "She's suffering from untreated pneumonia," the doctor said sternly. "If she had come even 2 days later, she might not have made it. Her lungs are weak, and her immune system is failing." Ada's knees buckled. She sank to the floor beside the bed, clutching her hands. Will she be okay? For now, but she needs rest, proper food, and most importantly, no more exposure to the elements. If she falls sick again, it could be fatal. Ada nodded slowly, her heart pounding. She looked at her mother, her only family, her entire world, lying still, hooked to machines they could never afford without mercy, and she made herself a silent promise. She would not let life take her. The rain came down hard that afternoon, turning the dusty footpath into soft brown mud and soaking the thin zinc roof of their little room with a steady drumming beat. Ruth sat outside under a makeshift tarp, wringing water from a faded wrapper she had just washed. Her hands were slower these days, knuckles stiff from years of hard labor. Inside, Ada stirred a pot of beans on their kerosene stove, humming quietly to herself, the same hum Ruth used to sing to her as a child. Their lives were quiet now, not easy, but quiet. They had grown used to the rhythm of scarcity. Ruth washed clothes for 3 families and earned just enough to keep their heads above water. Ada, without her mother knowing, had taken up tutoring local children and attending night classes with scholarship support from a church foundation. They didn't talk about dreams anymore, but love held them close, even in the coldest nights. Then, the sound of an engine. It was rare to hear a car in their part of the neighborhood, let alone the deep purr of a large SUV. Ruth looked up. Her brows furrowed when she saw the sleek black vehicle stop right in front of their small compound. The rain still fell steadily. From the SUV, a tall man stepped out, shielding himself with a large black umbrella. He wore a clean-pressed suit, expensive, foreign. His shoes barely touched the muddy ground as he walked towards her. Ruth stood slowly, uncertain. She clutched her wrapper, heart fluttering in confusion. The man stopped in front of her and smiled gently. There was something kind in his eyes, something familiar. "Good afternoon, Ma," he said softly, his voice deep and steady. "Good afternoon," Ruth replied, watching him carefully. He looked at her for a long moment, then took a small breath. "You probably don't remember me," he said, voice catching just slightly. "But many years ago, you gave your last 100 naira to a hungry boy outside a market. He didn't ask. He didn't speak. But you saw him. You gave him everything you had." Ruth's mouth opened, but no words came out. He smiled again. "That boy was me." She blinked. The rain suddenly felt far away. "I had been sleeping in the market gutters. My parents died in a fire. I had nothing. That day I hadn't eaten in 2 days. I watched you for hours. I didn't speak because I was too ashamed. But you gave me everything. Your last money." Ruth's hand covered her mouth. Her knees weakened slightly. "That night I bought food. I sat near a shop to eat it. A volunteer from a children's shelter saw me, took me in. They helped me. They found out I was good with computers, coding. I got a scholarship. I studied, then got another scholarship abroad." He smiled wider, his eyes misty. "I live in Canada now. I build software for hospitals. I've been looking for you for the last 6 years. I hired people, made calls. Then someone from that old market remembered you." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. Her lips trembled. I don't even remember your face," she whispered. "I never forgot yours," Obinna replied. "I never forgot the woman who saved my life." Ada had stepped outside now, confused by the stranger. She froze beside her mother, holding onto her arm. Ruth turned to her, voice barely audible. "Ada, this is the boy, the one I gave my last money to. That day we had nothing to eat." Obinna looked at Ada, nodded, and said, "You must be her daughter. I've heard about you. I've read about you. You're brilliant, just like her." Then he turned back to Ruth. "You gave me everything when you had nothing. Now it's my turn." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a brown envelope and a set of keys. "This is just the beginning. There's a house in a quiet, clean area. It's yours, fully paid. There's money for your treatment, and Ada's full university education is already covered." Ruth shook her head, tears pouring freely now. "Why? You owe me nothing." "No," Obinna said firmly. "I owe you everything." And in that moment, beneath the steady rhythm of falling rain, the past folded into the present. One small act of kindness, long forgotten by Ruth, had returned as a tidal wave of mercy, washing away years of pain, one tear at a time. The apartment Obinna moved them into wasn't flashy, but it was warm, clean, and filled with dignity. The first night Ruth slept on a mattress that didn't sag, with real sheets and curtains that swayed gently in the breeze. She cried, not from sadness this time, but from release, from the exhaustion of 20 years, carrying the weight of survival on her shoulders. She resisted at first. When Obinna handed her the keys, she shook her head, overwhelmed. "I didn't raise you for this. I gave out of love, not to be repaid." But Ada, now a young woman with the same quiet strength her mother carried for years, held Ruth's hands and said, "Mum, maybe this is what being blessed looks like. Maybe you don't always have to be the giver." Ruth finally let herself rest. Obinna was a man of his word. In the weeks that followed, he cleared Ada's outstanding school debts and personally wrote a letter to the dean of a respected business program securing her admission. "She has grit," he told. "She's built from hardship. She'll outperform everyone if you just give her the chance." They did. Ada dove into her studies with relentless fire. She wasn't just studying for a degree, she was studying to rewrite their future. But Obinna didn't stop there. One Sunday, he invited Ruth to a dusty, empty lot near a church downtown. "We're building something here," he said. "A kitchen, a safe place. We'll serve food to kids on the street, like I once was. Every plate will carry your name." Ruth looked at him in disbelief. "Why me?" He smiled. "Because you didn't ask questions. You just gave. That kind of love. It multiplied." 3 months later, Mama Ruth's meals opened with a humble ribbon-cutting ceremony. There were no cameras, no headlines, just dozens of children laughing as they were handed warm plates of jollof rice and fried plantain. Ruth volunteered there every day. She moved slowly, her health still fragile, but her eyes sparkled in ways they hadn't in decades. Children clung to her, calling her Mama Ruth like it was the most natural thing in the world. For the first time in so long, she felt useful not just in surviving, but in giving again, this time with strength behind her. Ada, meanwhile, thrived. She launched a small online business selling organic snacks and local crafts. Obina guided her through the steps, but let her make the decisions. She made mistakes, adjusted, grew. When someone asked her during a school seminar who inspired her most, she said, "My mother. She gave everything, even when she had nothing. I'm building this for her." In time, they found rhythm again. Not the old rhythm of scraping through, but a new one. Peace, purpose, progress. And Ruth, the woman who once had nothing but 100 naira and a mother's love, watched her world bloom with second chances. Not because she sought them, but because the love she gave had finally come home. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the small balcony. Ruth sat quietly in her chair, a cup of ginger tea nestled in her palms, steam rising gently into the soft evening air. The scent of hibiscus from the neighbour's garden floated in with the breeze. It was one of those rare Lagos evenings where the world didn't feel like it was rushing. Ada stepped out, holding something wrapped in brown paper. "Mama, I have something for you." Ruth looked up with a curious smile, her eyes tired but soft. Ada unwrapped it and handed her a framed photo. Ruth took it carefully. It was from the day Mama Ruth's meals opened, the moment someone had captured without her noticing. She was bent low, embracing a little boy whose face was smeared with stew, his smile wide, his arms wrapped tightly around her neck. She stared at the photo for a long moment. Her lips trembled. Her chest rose with emotion she didn't have words for. "It was just 100 naira, she said finally, her voice cracking. "Just 100 naira. But it came back multiplied." Ada knelt beside her and hugged her from the side. They didn't say much else. They didn't need to. The sky turned a deep orange, the kind of colour that makes you feel like life, somehow, still has something beautiful to offer. They sat together in silence, mother and daughter, survivors of a world that had tried to break them, now sitting in the peace they'd earned. No music, no applause, just breath, warmth, and the quiet power of one small kindness that had changed everything. Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.